I've tested 47 different Sony cameras over the last 10 years of professional video production, and some of them are incredible, but some of them are not really worth your money. So in this video, I'm gonna break down my favorite Sony cameras across every budget range. So no matter what budget you're working with, you'll know exactly which ones I'd recommend. Also, if you're curious which 47 Sony cameras I've tested, I will put a graphic right here on screen so you can see all of the ones I've tested. You can pause the video and check those out. So starting things off, let's look at the ultra budget category. So if you're somebody looking for genuinely the most affordable Sony camera you can find, I'd recommend you look for a Sony NEX mirrorless camera. Now, if you're not familiar, Sony actually had a wave of mirrorless cameras that they created in the early 2010s, kind of before mirrorless cameras really took the world by storm and are now the standard. But back then, people kind of made fun of the NEX lineup, but there are some good Sony NEX cameras that you should consider. The one that I'm actually holding in my hand right here is the Sony NEX 3N, and this is by far the most affordable Sony camera I've ever purchased. I bought this off of eBay for $69 just a couple years ago. You can usually find these on eBay or Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist between $150 and $250, and this typically is the most affordable Sony mirrorless camera that you can purchase. Now, in terms of specs and features, there's nothing too crazy with the Sony NEX 3N, but you do get quality 1080p video that can film in 24 frames per second. So for a lot of people just starting out, if you want some basic talking head videos or to film some B-roll, 1080p should be a fine starting point. But really where the main value is for me with the NEX 3N is the stills. I love the way the stills photography looks with this camera. You can shoot RAW photos or JPEGs. And for beginners, this is an awesome way to start learning the exposure triangle, how to set your ISO and your shutter speed and your aperture and how all of those exposure triangle pieces work together. You can learn on a really affordable camera like the NEX 3N, and you don't have to overspend right at the beginning of your content creation journey if you want to just try it out. This camera also uses the Sony E-mount, which is awesome because the E-mount is still what we see on Sony cameras today. If you purchase a brand new Sony mirrorless camera, it uses the E-mount, so you can use all of the lenses that you would use on higher end cameras, you can use with the NEX 3N. Honestly, purchasing a bunch of these NEX cameras really reignited my love for just carrying a walk around camera with me all the time. I have several of these and they're super fun to just take with me as I'm hanging out with my family, getting some candid moments with them and some casual street photography. I think these are a great choice for those kinds of moments. Now, if you're having a hard time finding the Sony NEX 3N, you can look for something like the NEX 5R or 5N or 5T. All of those are great Sony NEX cameras, or the NEX 6 or 7, both of those are great as well. So if you're trying to be as budget as possible, I definitely recommend a Sony NEX camera. Now this next category, I'm just calling budget. If the NEX series was ultra budget, if you step up just one tier to that, you're still gonna be in the used camera realm. But the camera I recommend in this category is going to be the Sony a6000. So this camera was kind of the first generation refresh of the NEX series. So you'll notice that the design feels very similar to the NEX series. And as you look especially at the Sony NEX 7 compared to the a6000, these look wildly similar in terms of design and even features. The biggest improvement that you'll see with the a6000 series is going to be autofocus performance. When this released in 2014, Sony marketed this camera as having the world's fastest autofocus in terms of APS-C cameras with a lag time of 0.06 seconds, which is blazing fast. And you'll notice this even still today when you take photos with this camera, and even video autofocus performance is pretty solid as well. Anytime I break out this camera to go snag some photos, I'm always impressed with the autofocus speed and even the overall image quality. Now, video-wise, this camera is still limited to 1080p video, and at this point, the whole world has kind of moved to 4K resolution, so that does kind of suffer here with the a6000, but it can shoot in 60 frames per second, so you can do a little bit of slow motion work if you want. And another difference between the NEX series and the a6000 is you get a clean HDMI out signal out of the a6000. So if you want to, you could pair a dummy battery with this and an HDMI capture card and have a pretty nice streaming camera for live streaming or podcasting that is limited to 1080p, but a lot of people still just stream in 1080p anyways. And when you pair this camera with a dummy battery, it really doesn't overheat too often. So this could actually be a viable streaming option if you want to use the a6000 for that purpose. I will say too, even though it is limited to 1080p, the video quality of the a6000 still does look really good. It is an older sensor, it's an 8-bit sensor, so not the greatest video quality in the world, but as I look at the footage and as you see it here on screen, it's totally passable and fun to use. Price-wise, these tend to hover between $300 and $400 in used condition. Ideally, if you can find it for $300 or under, I'd say that's actually a pretty good deal for the a6000. Now our next category are compact point-and-shoot cameras, and Sony has a few options that they've had over the years. Some are better than others, but these kinds of cameras are great for just throwing in a bag or in a pocket and have a built-in lens so you don't have to carry multiple lenses with you when you're traveling. And my favorite compact Sony point-and-shoot camera by far is the Sony RX100 Mark VII. This thing came out back in 2019, so it's getting pretty old at this point, but this is still the latest RX100 series camera to be released. The biggest selling point to me by far is the 24 to 200 millimeter equivalent zoom range, which is a massive zoom range for the tiny little point-and-shoot that this camera is. This is wide enough to capture some nice landscapes or even just point it at yourself for everyday vlogging, but also 200 millimeters is tight enough to zoom in and get some really sharp details of subjects that are pretty far away. Honestly, the reason I purchased this camera is because I actually film concerts quite a bit and I shoot photos at concerts, but there are times where I'm unable to get a press pass for a show, which lets me get super close to the artist or maybe even backstage with them to grab some cool angles. But when I don't have one of those passes, you're typically not allowed to bring interchangeable lens cameras into venues, which is why a point-and-shoot camera with a fixed lens is a perfect solution for those kinds of situations. So I brought this thing into concerts and shot some incredible looking photos and video clips out of the RX100, and I just like bringing this as my travel camera. If I go to Disneyland and I don't want a massive mirrorless camera, I can just bring this, throw it in a little side satchel, and I'm ready to go. Now you might ask yourself, Craig, why not grab the Sony ZV-1 series, which is a little bit newer as opposed to the RX100? Well, the main reason is just design and build quality and features. It just feels more premium when you use the RX100 series. There's even a pop-up viewfinder if you want to shoot photos through a tiny little viewfinder. It is really small, but it is fun in a pinch if you want to take photos through the viewfinder. And there's even a pop-up flash that works for adding a little fill flash to your scene. I'm also personally a huge fan of flip-up screens for viewing yourself when vlogging, and the RX100 series has a flip-up screen instead of a flip-out screen like the ZV-1 series has. And the reason is your line of sight is actually directly in line with the camera lens, versus like the ZV-1 series, if you want to view yourself, you have to look over to the right side and you can kind of tell that your eyes are off center, versus the RX100 series, I love that it's just directly in line with the camera lens. Now they actually still sell the RX100 brand new, but it's gone up in price over the years. It's now $1,500 to grab a point-and-shoot camera. However, because it's a little bit older, there are a ton of used options available. I actually got mine used for $500 off of Facebook Marketplace. I talked somebody down to $500 and they were like, sure, let's do 500. So if you can find a steal like that, go for it. But typically it's going to be closer to $800 to $900 to grab a used RX100 Mark VII. Now this next category is a super zoom travel camera, as opposed to the compact nature of the RX100 series. If you want a super zoom, ultimate all-in-one style camera, which camera should you go for? Well, my recommendation is actually a new product that we just tested here at Think Media, which is the RX10 Mark V. This is kind of like the ultimate dad cam or soccer mom camera of all time. The image quality is beautiful and the zoom range is wild. You can zoom from 24 millimeters all the way to 600 millimeters equivalent to reach out and grab subjects that are super far away. Honestly, in my time testing this camera, I was really inspired to try new things, and I shot a lot of wildlife. I shot some cool birds and landscapes and portraits of animals that I normally wouldn't really shoot because it's so difficult to carry around a 600 millimeter equivalent lens, but this camera gives you that super zoom ability in a pretty portable package. The last version of this camera came out almost 10 years ago. It was the RX10 Mark IV, and honestly, it still has a pretty big cult following. People love using this camera for wildlife and birding photography, and this new version is updated in almost every way. This camera is a little bit on the expensive end though, at $2,300 for a camera that you're not even able to swap any lenses. Of course, you do have a massive zoom range, but if you wanted to try some prime lenses that have a wider aperture, you can't do that with this camera. You're just limited to the built-in lens. And the biggest annoyance with this camera for me is the fact that there's no flip screen. So you have like this ultimate all-in-one travel camera, but you don't have a flip screen if you wanted to be able to do any sort of self-filming, whether you were vlogging handheld, because 24mm on the wide end is wide enough to do some vlogging, or you could throw it on a tripod if you want to get some better composition, but you're unable to see yourself when you're filming, which is a big bummer. That being said though, I had a blast using this camera and I did have to send it back to Sony because it was just a short-term loaner, but I'm so tempted to pick one up myself because honestly, this camera is so fun to use. So this next category I'm calling the best value APS-C camera that Sony currently offers. So APS-C is just a little bit of a smaller sensor size than a full frame sensor would be, but typically APS-C cameras are a little bit more affordable, and my favorite value by far out of the Sony ecosystem right now is the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II. This camera has been out for a couple years now, and it was the upgrade to the original Sony ZV-E10 that's super popular. I still really like that camera, and it could be a close second place for me here in terms of best value APS-C, but what makes this camera so much better than the original version is the updated sensor. The sensor inside of this camera is actually the same sensor that's in the Sony a6700 and even their cinema line APS-C camera, the FX30. Now the FX30 is about $2,000 to grab a cinema camera, and the ZV-E10 is only about $1,000 right now on Amazon or B&H, and you're able to get that updated Sony color science that's just absolutely gorgeous. It's a 10-bit sensor that's going to capture a lot better exposure and color information over the rest of the cameras that we've mentioned so far in this video, and does it for a pretty affordable price. It's also a pretty fun stills camera as well. Even though it's not really designed to be a professional photo camera, you still can get some awesome stills photographs out of the ZV-E10 II. It's also a very compact body and design, which is great for traveling with. It was also the first Sony camera to feature the vertical information display. So for vertical content shooters, if you record social media stuff for Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, your settings will all rotate automatically as you rotate the camera into vertical orientation, so you can see everything a lot easier. The one big addition that the a6700 adds over the ZV-E10 II is going to be in-body image stabilization. So this camera doesn't have IBIS. So if you're walking around vlogging, you just have to rely on either a lens that is stabilized, or you have to turn on the software stabilization mode in the ZV-E10 II, but there's no physical hardware that's stabilizing the sensor. So I could see a case where the best value could be the Sony a6700, and I adore that camera. It's probably one of the most underrated Sony cameras of all time. So either the ZV-E10 II or the a6700, I think are both great values for the APS-C lineup. Now these last few cameras are all full frame cameras, so you're gonna get the best image quality and low light performance out of these last few cameras on this list. And the first category I'm calling the Pro Hybrid camera. So this is great for both photography and video shooters out there who do a little bit of both. My favorite camera in this category has got to be the Sony a7 IV. For me, when you consider the launch price of this camera at $2,900, yeah, it feels a little bit expensive, but when you look at the specs of this camera is kind of like a baby Sony a1 II, which is nearly a $7,000 camera. For photo shooters, you can do 30 frames per second blackout free shooting, which is insane. I mean, you're talking A1 level speeds without an A1 level price tag. I love the photo capabilities out of the a7 IV. Of course, on the video side, everything is dialed. You have the AI processing chip, you have the updated Sony color science, 10-bit color, you get 4K up to 60 frames per second with zero crop, and even get 4K at 120 frames per second with a small crop. And I mean, just look at this video quality. For a camera that's really designed to be a true hybrid, like this is honestly maybe more of a photo camera than it is even a video camera, but the video performance to me is literally lacking nothing. I could just have this one camera in my entire arsenal of cameras and be totally satisfied with my video and photo performance. The sensor in this is actually partially stacked, which means readout speeds are going to be super fast if you're shooting high speed moving subjects. You're really not going to have to deal with rolling shutter too much. And the 4K video is actually downsampled from 7K resolution, so you have ultra sharp looking video straight out of camera. Of course, I wish this camera could record in a higher resolution format, something like 5K or 6K would be great, and everybody wanted open gate recording out of the a7 IV, but we did not get that. Even still, I think this is one of the best Sony cameras to ever be produced. Now, our next category is Pro Video. So if you're specifically a video shooter and you don't really have the need for any photography stills, what's the best that Sony has to offer? Well, assuming you're not going to purchase a Sony Venice or Sony Burano, even though I have tested those cameras and they're fantastic, of course, A more realistic option for consumers would be the camera that I'm recording this video on is the Sony FX3. Now, obviously the FX5 just came out and we haven't had a chance to test it out yet, though we should get it in hand very soon. And of course, I'll share my thoughts as soon as I get that camera. But for now, the FX3 holds the top spot for the video category. Now, I will say the Sony FX6 is really close, and mostly just because of the built-in ND that the FX6 has, as well as the ergonomics and form factor. That camera is so fun to hold in the hand, but the FX3 is more affordable. You get the same level of image quality and dynamic range out of the sensor. It's also smaller and easier to use for beginners than the FX6 is. And I love the simple audio top handle that is included in the box when you purchase the FX3. That means straight out of the box, you're able to adapt XLR style microphones if you're using more professional mics. And I especially love this camera for lower lit environments. I'm somebody who's done a ton of different weddings and concerts, and a lot of times the lighting in those environments aren't very good. It's kind of more documentary-esque and you just have to work with what you have, and the FX3 absolutely shines in those lower light conditions. Of course, unfortunately, the price of the FX3 has risen over time, just like every other camera. It's now like $4,300 to grab this camera brand new, but even at its higher price, I still do recommend the FX3. Now, I did want to mention one honorable mention camera. Of all of the 47 different Sony cameras I've tested, there's one camera that I use that I was like, dang, like this is just a cool and fun camera. I think everybody should try it out. This is the Sony FX2. When this camera launched, I think it was kind of underwhelming for a lot of creators, but since that time, I think people realize the value of the Sony FX2, and I've seen a ton of creators actually purchase this and adopt it into their production workflow. One of the biggest differences between the FX2 and the FX3 and FX6 is that the FX2 has a higher resolution sensor. It's got a 33 megapixel sensor, which is the same one found in the Sony a7 IV, and the sensor just really adds a level of sharpness and detail that we don't really see out of the FX3. Now, the FX3 is a low light beast and the FX2 doesn't perform as well in low light, but in terms of sharpness, I really like the way the FX2 looks. I was actually talking about the FX2 with our content director, Kyle, and he runs our entire Think Media podcast, and he kind of thinks that this is the ultimate podcast camera because it's a little bit sharper and crispier, but still has the built-in fan that the FX3 has, so it's never gonna overheat on you for really long record times, but you get that sharper image. I also love recording through a viewfinder, and this has a really large tiltable viewfinder. Kind of reminds me of recording on an old camcorder, but the image you're seeing through that viewfinder is really high quality. And right now the FX2 is on sale for $2,500, so it's cheaper than the Sony a7 IV. It's way cheaper than the FX3, and you're kind of getting a mix of features between the a7 IV and V and the FX3 in the FX2 body. So despite what you might hear online about the FX2 not being worth it, honestly, my experience with the FX2, I love the thing. Now, there are a lot of other awesome Sony cameras that I didn't mention in this video, but if I had to narrow down my favorite options for every kind of camera in every budget range, these would be my favorites. Now, if you want to see some of my favorite lenses for Sony mirrorless cameras, you can click or tap the screen right here to watch that video, and I'll see you in the next one.